Okay, this is a quick roadmap for my dungeon course. I've had some feedback that that it needs a bit of tightening up, and I know it does. It's Monday, the 18th of May, 2020, and this is the overall roadmap for 2020 for this course. I feel like I should let you know at least what's going on. So I'll talk through it. This is a Gantt chart. This is Emma's project. I quite like this project from my consultancy days. And so let's talk about what's going on, why you're not getting enough content. I know you're not. I know you need more. I know I would want more. So at the moment, because Unity Learn is available, I feel obliged to be hitting that as hard as I can. And one of the things that I really need to nail down that's driving me slightly bonkers is the jobs burst ECS dots stuff, which gives you a performance boost of factor of about 10 or up to 100, to be honest, up to 1,000. It's ridiculous. The performance is ridiculous, but the trouble is it's mind-bendingly complicated, a lot like C++ in a lot of ways. So you've got data, you've got behaviors and systems. The systems are the things. Data is just pure data. Behavior is access to that data, and then you've got the systems which do clever things like collision detection and stuff like that. And I'm working my way through it, but it's going to take time. So that's the allotted time. This month, up until the end of Unity Learn's availability, I'm going to be using that. Also checking out something called intterested, which was doing it before Unity started doing it, and it's got a code generator, but even that is pretty complicated and horrendous. So I'm sifting through that. That is going to feed into all my courses. It's going to feed into Dungeons, because having 10 times the performance or 100 times or 1,000 times the performance is just going to be useful. For like example, all the candles. If we made all the candles in a scene, this stuff, and then you're looking at. So if you're aiming at frames per second of 60, but you need to develop and hit much higher than that to take into account of all sorts of bottlenecks further down the road, like network rubbish and all sorts of problems. So the higher the performance you can get out of whatever you're doing, that feeds into wherever the bottleneck comes. So, but the trouble is, like I say, it could be a fool's labyrinth in the fact that it turns one line of code into like 30 lines of impenetrable nonsense. But you get this huge performance boost, so that's why you do it. Anyway, this roadmap, I'm giving this today and tomorrow to finish this roadmap. But I've spent a few days on it already. Well, just little thoughts about it. I've got my other project, The Forest, that's taking a great deal of time. Hopefully some of that can feed into the dungeon. At the moment I'm working on a bush that you can hit and push. You can always check out my YouTube channel, Boss PC Training, to see for free content and to see the work in progress that I'm doing. So basically, as you run into a bush, it knocks it over. And this could be used for the system I'm working on for bushes. Could be used for environments in a dungeon where you run into, I don't know, a table, for example. Basically using rigid bodies, but the trouble with using the inbuilt Unity physics system, which is brilliant by the way, and it's probably the way to go, is the fact that it's horrendously expensive in terms of processing power. But what I've been working on is a system that only enables the rigid bodies of things that are within like 10 meters of you, and that makes it's a bit like an LOD system for physics. So that means you get this massive performance. So you can have thousands of physics objects, but the only ones that actually matter are the ones within 10 meters of you. So as long as they don't float off or anything, and they just stay absolutely static until they're in range. I don't know how applicable it is for dungeon objects, but I'm pretty sure I can imagine like an Indiana Jones ball rolling. All that could be handled with physics, and then you don't have to animate it, which is brilliant. You probably need a damage system there. Anyway, a multiplayer. I could actually put Photon in there because that's what I'm going to be. So I'm going to be pushing Photon, and again, that could feed into this dungeon designer, because I'm pretty sure a lot of people. Multiplayer is applicable for my forest course and for this course, the dungeon course, because it's just so important. And then I've got this thing, cities and cars, which is a thing that's just in the conceptual stage at the moment of generating cities and car systems. But I'm not spending any time on that at the moment. That's just in the back burner. Enviro, that's sunsets, sunrises, weather systems. I don't know how much of that. I mean, it is plus aura, and aura is essential. It's kind of essential for dungeons because it provides volumetric lighting, so the proper light beams. So that again is a bit on the back burner, but it's really important. It's more important for forests, but it's still ambient lighting basically. It's still important for dungeons, but it's not as important and as difficult as it is for forests. Mountains again on the back burner. How much of that feeds into dungeons? Well, I suppose you could say that it's the entrance to the dungeon. If you're mountains and I don't know, castles, I don't know. And again on the back burner, so I wouldn't worry too. It's not taking up a lot of my time, if any. Twitch integration again is just something it's something I'm aware of, and it's really important for games and stuff. Any game that wants to make it needs to be highly Twitch integrated, even if it's just thoughts about what makes Twitch interesting to watch. UI design, I know it's tedious and no one really wants to go near it, but having UI design is important if you're actually going to have a project. But again, it's not the essential. So the critical stuff is, the design stuff, which I'm coming to in a minute. Conspiracy Project was a project I did for holistic 3D stuff. So that was using a forest and a house, and it was going to lead into a science lab dungeon. So I could put that down here. Science lab dungeon. Duration 32 days. 32 days. And starting today. Where are you? Oh no. Right, you'll do. Copy. Okay. Science lab again, that's not going to be something I'm doing for now. Over there, son. And yeah, so it's from May. This is the starting. I don't really need it. Right, to the end of January, and then on. This is artificial because these are all ongoing, and this dungeon is going to be ongoing. I'm going to keep hammering at this course until I'm happy with it, and that's going to take a long time. So don't think that what you're getting now is all that's happening, because there is more coming, I promise. So what I did with my forest one, I just kept putting the content in. Although I did start with more content. This one I kind of started with less content, and I'm rapidly trying to fill it up, but I'm also being distracted by trying to push some of the other stuff, like this jobs burst system, physics system. Those two things are taking up a huge amount of my time at the moment. And this multiplayer thing, I really want to implement multiplayer for people. Anyway, to the project in hand, to Dungeon. So I was happily working along on this dungeon course, and then I was trying to get proper fog going. I got auras fine, and I've got some particle systems for creating kind of an artificial fog, but I find it very disappointing. So I'm looking at Shader Forge and Amplify to try and create fog, and then I'm hopefully going to make one for Shader Forge, because Shader Forge is actually free. So it's public domain now. So Shader Forge is important. Then we've got 3D Kit Lite and how that can be applied to dungeons. Again, I urge you to go and check out the 3D Kit training that's available on Unity Learn at the moment for free. That all stops in a month's time, so bear in mind on June, I think it's even earlier than that, they will stop giving you free access, and then it starts wanting money to be done. To be honest, I'm not sure it justifies the price of it at the moment. I'm not sure, especially ongoing things. A one-off simple payment like Udemy's model is far more my thing than ongoing subscriptions, especially as the content seems very limited and the promised technical support that you get is non-existent. You can have access to one-on-one, but it will cost you £60 an hour for the privilege, and that won't be bodied for anybody else. So I find that it's all very beta, the one-to-one support on Unity Learn, and the courses themselves, to be honest, they don't seem to be very well curated or maintained. So what happens is it might work for that one version for that 1 month maybe, and then next month it's all deprecated and it all falls to pieces. So you've got to get the right version of Unity for the assets. But they did an amazing first person thing, and they generated this whole first person architecture, which would have been amazing to put into this course. To be honest, it's Fps Integration. Another month. It's not going to be Sunday, but let's just move them off. Well, actually, just Sunday to Sunday does it. Grief. Didn't. Come on, move. Not updating. Anyway, hello. No, it is that one. Yeah. So, what were we talking about? Oh yes. So there's all these assets that are kicking about in Unity, the official site, but they seem to be they just abandon them. Anyway, so yes, to go on, the philosophy that I am doing is going to be keep supporting the course and keep pumping in and make it the best course it can possibly be. I'm aiming for another minimum of extra 15 hours of training into this course, at least, and I want to make these courses something that you'd be silly not to do. That's my aim. And even if they're more of a compendium where you just dip in and say, oh, I need fog, and you go to the chapter on fog and just learn fog and go, oh yeah, that's a cool way of doing fog, thanks. And even if you only get 10 minutes of something useful, that 10 minutes will save you weeks of work or effort or brain damage. So what was I talking about? We were doing fog using Shader Forge. Shader Forge is a fantastic thing and it's freely available, so that's what we're going to be using. Amplify is amazing, and then we've got the Unity one, which I don't know is Shader Labs. I think it's called a Shader Graph, I can't remember, and it's only available for HDRP and Universal Pipeline instead of the standard one. Why they did that, it just deeply saddens me. Why can't you support all your systems? Just like, I mean, Shader Forge supports all of them, and so does Amplify, so it's not beyond the ken, you know. I mean, why not support the main thing just because it's not as pretty. Good grief. Anyway, enough of that. 3D kit light and dungeons. Yep. So we're going to have rolling balls. We're going to have acid pits. We're going to have bridges. We've got a character that can look a little bit like Lara Croft, but we're probably using the Invector stuff. I suppose I should import things. So insert task. Invector Integration. Invector 3D light integration. Again, workflow. Anyway, 32 days. I'm only guessing at 32. Start today. That's actually true because I have been working on it, but and again, this is just a rough roadmap of where I'm going, what I'm hoping to do. So yeah, so Invector 3D light integration with 3D kit light, bringing them together, putting them into a dungeon context. Then we've got Seric environment, which is a kind of high-tech tech wolf in some sort of science lab in the future. Because dungeons don't have to just be fantasy ones, and it's just such an interesting environment that I'm going to tear it down and show a few things with it. Not a lot, just something. It's just people put a lot of effort into that environment, and Snap's environment, and I think they also do a dungeon one, so I will check that out. But again, the problem with it is it's all for HDRP, and it's only, funnily enough, it only works on one particular version of HDRP, so it would only work, I think, on HDRP 2018 long-term support. I think, is that right? I can't remember. It was a horror show getting that to work, but it's beautiful, and I'm stripping it and tearing it down for assets into standard assets, because you could anything. My contention hypothesis is that anything you do in HDRP you can do almost as good in standard with enough effort and third-party tools support. You don't need, at the moment at least. That's my theory. I mean, I might be being a bit of a what are they called? You burn them at the stake, heretic, by saying that there. Detection and stealth, there's a really cool tutorial, so I'm going to try and implement detection and stealth into dungeons. I think that's a nice thing to do. New assets, I've got a whole bunch of assets to go through, like the dungeon, dwarf dungeon asset, dungeon architect. I picked them all up in the sale, so I've got to go through them. That's probably going to take that's going to take 2 months at least. Let me change that. 64. Yeah. And again, I wonder if I'm actually going to be able to get through all this in this year. I will try my best, but obviously these things are ongoing, and you know, this is the aim. And if I don't get it done in the next few months, it will be on to the next year. Room list. So I've covered Forge. That's done. And I was on Graveyard, and I needed fog, and I was just having such a horrible time making fog. And then I realised that we had this thing with Beauty to Learn. So room list, making a room list of all the dungeon rooms that we need to create, and creating them. Room designers, assets, or what should we call it? Yeah, software. It's not software, it's utilities. I don't know, Any RPG, you need to dip back into that. I got as far as playing around with the sword on it and the Yuma characters integration, but it's you know, any RPG in itself is a heck of a beast to be getting into. So again, that's on the back burner whilst we try and get everything else sorted, like the design side of things, and then that's an engine. That's the game engine. Very cool game engine, by the way, and it is provided as part of the course, version Alpha 0.7, I think. So Then we've got creating a prefabs pack. So that's creating a bunch of prefabs that we can use as a kind of palette. So it'd be like things like tables, cabinets, all that sort of thing. We need to create something that's in a pack that we can just import as an asset and not have to keep importing all the different ones. Again, I can't distribute that because that's the property of the asset store and the assets. But what you can do is search for the free ones, buy stuff, put it all together, and then you've got this whole thing, this database of chairs, of carpets, of portraits and things. It's all ready to go so that you can import that as an asset to any project and get going. So say you've got a game jam or you've got to do something in 2 days, then you just import that and you're ready to. So you import your prefabs pack and import your utility, and then you're immediately going rather than spending 2 or 3 days importing various assets to get going and searching for them. They're all ready to go. So you've got chairs, and all the chairs are in one place, and they've all got wood. And so if you've got different types of wood that you need, wood textures or stone textures and all that sort of thing. So the more time we spend preparing this prefabs pack, it makes you so much faster in other projects. Science Lab Dungeon, that tees into Seric environment, keys into a lot of things actually. That just seems to be, even in a normal dungeon, like in Dungeons 3, where the undead have their cryo lab, science labs and the mad scientist, it seems to be a common theme. So that feeds into a lot of the other stuff. Fps Integration, that's again an ongoing project. It's going to take longer than 32 days. I don't know, 60, 428. There we go. Right, lovely. So the problem, well, basically there's all sorts of FPS stuff that we've got out there, and I feel it's criminal not to be integrating it. The Dark Tree one with beautiful mechanics, the Ultimate FPS, and Invector's 3D stuff. All of those things should be integrated for a very cool experience of basically the controller of moving around the dungeon or any environment, to be honest, any 3D environment. We should be integrating as much as possible rather than creating it from scratch, because if we can use professional grade extensible projects software, it just lifts everything, and you don't have to worry about the code maintenance. If you create everything from scratch, you've got to actually maintain that code. So, for example, a first-person/third-person controller. The more we can delegate to someone else who's willing to do that, and that's their job, the less time it's going to soak up for us. Although the time soak is there in the integration and understanding their assets, and the fact that the problem is that some of them try and tie you in just to their stuff, which is, I don't know, that's something to consider. You've got to spend £500 with us, and it won't work with anyone else. And some of them, it's just, some of the animations and things are just not designed to be modular or support other stuff. For example, we've got in the 3D kit, we've got a fantastic little third-person person running about, but the way she's designed is not, as far as I can see, doesn't work with the humanoid rig and the Invector 3D and the kind of standard, the industry standard. So I don't know. The time it needs to change it over, I don't know. And another thing, and part of my philosophy, is to try as much as possible to skim over stuff if I can. For example, humanoid animation and rigging, because to be honest, that is a whole course in itself. creating a humanoid and rigging it, done in Blender or 3D Max. Character Studio was some of my favourite of mine, and Poser. But they, just that one thing of making humanoids that look decent and do decent movements and motion capture, that in itself will take a year, I reckon, to do properly. Or you can just grab Invector 3D and stick it in, and get going. And this is the thing with Unity, is if you take, for example, learning how to make a candle, just a static candle that flickers with a realistic flame, you can go out and film a real candle against a black background, then take that and break it down into images, create it into a contact sheet, and create your own candle. Or you could find a candle asset that's in, and import that and use that. On the one hand, you learn everything there is about making candles. On the other hand, how long did it take you to do that? So everything can be gone into a microscope, but if you do that, progress grinds to a halt. So it's a very tricky thing, because you don't want to understand nothing about what's going on, and you need to understand a certain amount. For example, another example, the one that's closest to my current problem, is this whole jobs burst ECS dots thing. Really, I just want an asset that does it all. So I just say rotate cube. It goes away and makes the most super efficient rotate cube you could ever possibly believe. And about 5 pages of machine code or whatever it does. And, there we go. What I don't really want to do is have to learn a whole new design philosophy and language and code that machine code myself manually, which is all possible. But again, it's the amount of time it takes, and the fact that, it's the trade-off of knowing absolutely everything that's going on and just skimming along, grabbing it, using it, moving on. It's also one of the things that I've been looking at is the shader system. What is it called? Shader Toy, and stuff they're doing on Shader Toy compared to getting the same effect in Unity. And in Shader Toy, in about 4 pages, they create this beautiful, beautiful thing that works on. It just works out of the browser. And Unity will take 10 times more resources. So instead of it fitting in 5 pages of code and 1 megabyte, Unity's project will be 200 megabytes. But at the end of the day, no one really cares. Well, there's the Zen philosophy of making everything super, super efficient, but there's also the philosophy of making it generally applicable. And the thing that Unity wins on completely at the moment is the fact that, okay, it's 200 megabytes, but who really cares about 200 megabytes? And you've got so much more that you've got there. You've got so much more functionality. So instead of just being a static camera at one set angle, you've got a whole first-person movement system and camera system, and you've got sounds, and you've got all sorts of things. And the sound integration is you bring in a WAV file and you plop it in. Not the most efficient way of doing things, but beautiful simplicity, which is the thing that I really like about Unity, is that it simplifies everything down to, like rotating a cube. Is you drag your thing in, and you can rotate a cube with 1 line of code in Unity, and that's just, it's, there is a power to Unity and C# that's incredible, absolutely incredible, as I'm sure you're probably aware. And one of the problems with this jobs burst stuff is it breaks that beauty into back to this horrendous spaghetti stuff. So I was hoping Entitas was going to take away the horror, but yeah, I'm still in the midst of the jungle that is, or the dungeon that is Jobs Burst ECS. But once I've fought my way through, I think I need to give myself maybe another month for that. Once I've fought my way through, I will hopefully be able to hack a path and make it a lot simpler for other people, which is the whole purpose of these courses, is for me to share with you the years of hacking around in the wilderness and in these dungeons of knowledge, and sharing with you the kind of really clean and lovely path, shining. Well, that's my aim, is a shining path for you to get through, so you can go, you know, this is how you do a dungeon, bam bam, rather than, you know, getting lost in the labyrinths. So yeah, that's an overview of the roadmap of 2020, and I'll go over it one more time. I'm going to spend the next 2 months, 1 month with Unity Learn as much as I can, and then another month. It may not take that long, I don't know. Just trying to nail down Jobs Burst and ECS for the huge performance boost it gives you. It's just the roadmap. I've got Forest that I'm still working on and will keep working on. It keeps dragging me back to do things, but all these off projects or other projects do feed into Dungeons, so don't be too worried that I'm going to spreading myself too thin. I've only got, at the moment, 2 active courses on Udemy, which is Forest and Dungeon. And I'm working on others, but these are the 2 main ones. Forest and this stuff. Multiplayer, yeah, I really would like to get that sorted. Cities and Cars is not priority. E priority. Environora, like C, D priority. Mountains, E priority. Twitch integration, E/F, E/F. So they're not high priority by any shape of imagination. Fog's important. I do need to get on with Fog, and that's coming in hopefully about a month's time. Hopefully, 3D integration. I'm kind of mostly there with that one, really. So that should be in pretty soon. I'm going to shorten that down, put it over there, because I'm working out that workflow. If I put that workflow somewhere else, no, that is the workflow. 3D kits and dungeons, again, that's half done. Seric environment, yeah, okay, we can bring that back, because I've compiled Seric, but I'm not really very happy with it. The load times, I'm going to put in a loading system, but I could provide a quick overview of that one. It is very, very beautiful, and I can provide that as a demo, tech demo, which is what it is, really. Detection and stealth, yeah, put it there. New assets, yeah. It's going to take some time. Can I stretch that out? Stick it there. New assets going to take longer than that. 96. Yeah. Dungeon Architect, part of that, really. It's part of that one. It's a subtask, really. How do I do the sub? I'm not going to do it. I'll do the subtask later, but that is a subtask with that one. Room list, and yeah, and that feeds into these assets as well, so let's put that there. So that's all covered by this one, really. Utilities, again, that's covered by that one. Yeah. Any RPG engine, yeah. Well, I mean, there are plenty. You know, Cohesion's website will, if you're really desperate to get going on any RPG, there's plenty of YouTube on Cohesion's website, but I'm working on that as well to try and simplify it, make it a bit easy to follow along. Prefab pack, that's kind of ongoing. Science Lab Dungeon, yeah. And Fps Integration. And yeah, so that is the that's all the stuff that I am hoping to cover. So I'm off to try and wrap my head around this stuff and try and synthesize it down to be applicable to dungeons. Okay, so just to let you know what the plan is anyway.